The stifling heat, which had offered a deceptive pause, clamped down on the city with renewed ferocity as August reluctantly surrendered its final days. A brief, welcome lull had tricked the urbanites into believing relief was near, only for the thermometers to stubbornly climb back past 35 degrees Celsius, cocooning the metropolis in a thick, oppressive shroud. Alara Lowe clicked on the vehicle's climate control, leaning back into the leather passenger seat. Though dusk was gently settling around 8 p.m., stepping outdoors still felt like walking into an oven. Her son, Lorcan Evans, was at the wheel of her sleek sedan. She wasn't entirely certain how this arrangement had come about, but he'd made the request to drive with a quiet, unyielding intensity she'd found inexplicably difficult to resist. Their destination was Grandview Galleria, a sprawling retail complex, for some essential last-minute provisions before Lorcan returned to campus for his autumn semester. An earlier expedition had been meticulously planned, but an unforeseen series of errands had derailed their schedule, pushing their outing deep into the evening hours. They would need to move with purpose if they hoped to accomplish their tasks before the complex's closing time. Alara glanced sideways at Lorcan, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips despite her internal unease. He was dressed in his characteristic ensemble. Comfortable, slim-fit jeans that hugged his powerful thighs, well-worn trainers, and a loose-fitting button-down shirt, its sleeves casually rolled to reveal the athletic build beneath. His tousled light brown hair fell across his forehead, and his piercing blue eyes remained focused on the road ahead. Honestly, Lorcan, why we're even bothering to acquire new items for your university wardrobe is quite beyond me, Alara remarked, her voice light, almost teasing. You seem perfectly content rotating through the same 3 or 4 outfits. No one would ever discern the difference. Lorcan offered a slight, almost imperceptible shrug, his gaze unwavering from the winding thoroughfare. It will eventually grow cooler. I do require some proper trousers, perhaps a couple of long-sleeve shirts, and certainly a new hooded top. The remaining segment of their journey passed in a charged, unspoken stillness. Alara's thoughts, despite her efforts, inevitably gravitated back to the unsettling incident from several weeks prior. They had been intimate, remarkably close, mere steps from where her husband, Ronan Rivers, lay incapacitated by drink, entirely oblivious. In the weeks that followed, they had meticulously maintained a careful distance, largely at her firm insistence, though Lorcan's unspoken yearning had been palpable. She could not deny the way he looked at her now, the subtle spark it ignited deep within her. But Alara was his mother. It was her solemn duty to uphold rigid boundaries, to do what was unequivocally right. She was married, trapped in a stagnant and perhaps suffocating partnership, but married nonetheless. And Lorcan was merely 22, his entire future stretching brightly before him. Resisting his quiet, persistent pleas, telling him their intimacy could not possibly continue, had demanded more sheer willpower than anything she had ever encountered. Now, as they sped towards the mall, Alara meticulously counted the days. Only a handful remained before Lorcan's return to campus. Surely, once surrounded by bright, ambitious young women his own age, his attention would naturally shift away from his middle-aged mother back home. Once he was truly gone, she could finally confront the shambles of her marriage to Ronan. But that, she decided, was a problem for another day. Right now, her focus had to be on helping her son prepare for the upcoming academic term. That's what responsible mothers invariably did, wasn't it? She risked another, surreptitious glance at Lorcan in the driver's seat. He had turned 22, yet his features possessed a sharp, almost chiseled masculine definition that reminded her achingly of Ronan, years ago, before bitterness and relentless alcohol consumption had softened the edges of his once striking countenance. Lorcan, sensing her gaze, met her eyes and offered a slow, deliberate smile that sent a confusing flutter through her chest. A part of her desperately wished he would cease looking at her in such a way. Sons were not supposed to view their mothers with such intensity. Her role was simple: assist him in purchasing clothing, send him off, and rigorously suppress her own bewildering, illicit desires. Upon reaching Grandview Galleria, they discovered the multi-level parking structure surprisingly full for such a late hour. Clearly, they were not the sole individuals engaged in last-minute back-to-school preparations. Lorcan expertly navigated the sedan up the spiraling ramps, his eyes scanning for any available vacant spot. He circled higher and higher until they finally emerged onto the exposed topmost level, beneath a sky deepening from twilight violet to an inky, starless black. Alara watched his competent handling of the vehicle with a detached flicker of maternal pride. Lorcan chose a spot quite distant from the nearest cluster of parked cars, close to the very edge of the structure. As they disembarked from the cocoon of the air-conditioned car, Alara was momentarily struck by the sweeping panoramic vista of the city spread out below, a glittering, sprawling tapestry of urban lights against the encroaching darkness. It possessed a stark, almost brutal urban beauty. Before they could head towards the mall entrance, before Lorcan even engaged the car's locking mechanism, he turned towards her, his expression taut, purposeful. Alara felt a familiar, unsettling tightening in her stomach. This wasn't going to be merely a typical shopping trip. Was it, Lorcan? She thought, bracing herself instinctively. We're out in the open, Lorcan. Anyone could see, she murmured, glancing nervously around the mostly deserted rooftop expanse. Hardly anyone is up here, and it's getting properly dark now. Lorcan countered, his voice low but imbued with an insistent edge. Alara shook her head, pulling away slightly. Lorcan exited the vehicle, and they walked briskly towards the bank of elevators that descended into the mall proper. Alara found herself profoundly unsettled by his newfound assertiveness. He had always been a well-mannered, generally reserved young man. Yet, the deep connection they had shared earlier that summer seemed to have unlocked something bolder, more demanding within him, a confidence that hadn't faded despite the weeks of forced separation. She sensed an almost primal, radiating energy from him now. Stepping into the elevator and then into the mall itself brought a welcome rush of chilled, recycled air, a stark and immediate contrast to the oven-like conditions outside. They prioritized Lorcan's shopping first, given his imminent departure. They made their way to Elysian Threads, a large anchor department store where he could likely find everything on his list. The process was remarkably efficient. Lorcan was not one for dawdling over fashion choices. He possessed a clear idea of what he required and made decisions with swift certainty, seemingly indifferent to specific brands or styles beyond basic functionality. Soon, they were exiting the store, a substantial shopping bag filled with his new university attire swinging casually from his hand. Let's grab some artisanal ice cream, Lorcan suggested abruptly. We don't really have the time, Lorcan, Alara protested gently, her voice strained. The mall is about to close its doors. Come on, it will be quick. I could truly use something sweet. Alara was once again struck by how utterly commanding he had become. It was subtly disconcerting, yet she found herself oddly compliant, inexplicably yielding to his quiet, firm directives. He was tall now, his frame lean and undeniably strong, mirroring the formidable physique Ronan had possessed in his own youth. Without further argument, Alara fell into step beside him. They walked in an uncharacteristic silence towards the Sweet Indulgence kiosk nestled in a small, open seating area near the very center of the mall's upper level. Alara chose a scoop of dark chocolate chunk. Lorcan opted for salted caramel fudge, both served in small paper cups with flimsy plastic spoons. They found a tiny, unoccupied table amidst a scattering of others, surrounded by the now quiet, nearly deserted food stalls. Lorcan, what on earth do you imagine you're doing? She hissed, glancing around nervously, her heart beginning to pound. Alara scanned the immediate vicinity. Most of the tables were empty now as the remaining shoppers hurried towards the nearest exits. The only other person nearby was a man in crisp khaki trousers and a neat polo shirt, seated perhaps 30 feet away, seemingly engrossed in finishing a late slice of pizza. So, what you're subtly implying is, if we were entirely alone, you wouldn't object, Lorcan murmured, his piercing gaze locking directly with hers. Alara sighed, a wave of frustration and something akin to reluctant resignation washing over her. That wasn't precisely what she had intended to convey, but her own hesitant, faltering words betrayed her. And perhaps Lorcan wasn't entirely incorrect. Perhaps a deeper, unacknowledged part of her yearned for something she couldn't bring herself to consciously acknowledge. She loathed feeling like a mother utterly incapable of saying no, Yet that seemed to be precisely the troubling role she was inexorably slipping into. "That's not what I'm saying at all, and you know it," she retorted, though her voice conspicuously lacked conviction. "We shouldn't be doing this. Not here, not anywhere, but especially not here in a public space." She leaned forward slightly, her voice barely a whisper. "Lorcan, someone could walk by at any given moment. We absolutely cannot. Nobody is paying the slightest attention. They're all singularly focused on their food or on getting out of here." Lorcan countered softly, his voice a soothing balm against a rising panic. Alara could have easily pulled away, stood up abruptly, created a decisive distance between them. But she remained seated, frozen by a confusing, potent mix of acute fear and illicit fascination. The potential for sudden, humiliating exposure was immense, terrifying. "You belong to me, Mother," Lorcan stated quietly, his spoon scraping the very bottom of his paper cup with a soft, resonant sound. "Lorcan, don't be utterly absurd. I am your mother." He leaned closer still across the small, round table. "You're my mother, yes. But you're not just my mother anymore, are you?" A deep, burning blush crept inexorably up Alara's neck and flooded her cheeks. She felt as if she barely recognized this intense, formidable young man who was, unequivocally, her son. Once they had both scraped the last stubborn vestiges of melted ice cream from their cups, Lorcan pushed his chair back slightly. "Let's go find something for you now, Mother." The lingerie department seemed eerily deserted apart from the sales associate, a young woman with fiery red hair twisted into a messy bun, leaning casually against the counter, looking utterly bored, her gaze fixed on her phone. Alara walked hesitantly between racks displaying delicate bras and panties, a sudden, unsettling awareness dawning on her. She had never, in all her life, shopped for undergarments with her son before. It was certainly not a typical mother-son activity. Yet, as she navigated the hushed aisles, she felt Lorcan's presence incredibly close behind her, almost hearing his steady, even breathing. She could feel his insistent gaze on her, a palpable weight. Turning, she found him standing directly behind her, closer than strictly necessary. She couldn't recall the last time Ronan had even remotely commented on her lingerie, let alone shown any genuine interest. A husband was supposed to notice such things, wasn't he? But Ronan was usually too absorbed in the television or too far gone in his perpetual drink. "That's far too predictable," Lorcan commented, gesturing dismissively toward a lacy black set she'd paused to examine. "What do you mean?" Alara asked, flustered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Try these." Lorcan indicated a set in a shimmering seafoam green, almost emerald, hanging on a nearby display. The material looked gossamer thin, almost translucent. A perfectly matching bra dangled delicately beside the briefs. "Lorcan, be reasonable. I could never, ever wear something like that." "Why not?" "Of course you can. Try them on for me." A part of her, the sensible, deeply maternal part, wanted desperately to push him away, to tell him to stop this madness, to desperately cling to the fraying edges of propriety. But that part felt increasingly weak, utterly overshadowed by a deeper, more reckless impulse that urged her to yield, to simply surrender to the strange, powerful current pulling them both inexorably along. "All right," she conceded softly, her voice barely audible, taking the hanger with the green lingerie set from his outstretched hand. Alara turned towards the fitting rooms at the very back of the department. She felt Lorcan following her, his steps echoing hers on the carpeted floor. She could hear his breathing, slightly heavier now, as she reached the entrance to the changing area. She turned to face him directly. "You cannot come in here," she stated, trying desperately to sound firm, authoritative. "You'll have to wait outside. Lorcan, I want to see you try them on," he said, his voice low and utterly unwavering. He gestured vaguely at the deserted department around them. "Look, there's nobody here. Who's going to know, Mother?" "Lorcan, absolutely not. I'm going in alone," she insisted, though her resolve felt brittle, fragile. A silent, tense battle of wills hung palpable in the air between them. It felt disturbingly as if their roles had entirely reversed. He was now issuing precise directives, and she felt an inexplicable, overwhelming compulsion to obey him. She was undeniably the parent, yet he somehow held all the authority in this singular, pivotal moment. Pleasing him fulfilling this strange, illicit request suddenly seemed paramount, essential. Fine, she sighed, utterly defeated. She pushed open the heavy door to the fitting room area. Small, identical cubicles with closed doors lined the narrow, dimly lit corridor. Alara chose the third one on the right, opened the door, and stepped inside. Lorcan followed her in without the slightest hesitation, pulling the door firmly shut behind them. "Put them on, Mother," Lorcan said. It was not a question. It was an order. "You need to turn around," Alara countered, clutching the hanger tightly to her chest. "No. Yes, Lorcan. Please." The tension thickened perceptibly in the confined space, suffocating her. "Mother, I've already seen you. Everything. Yes, you have, but not like this. Turn around, or I'm not doing it. We could just leave right now, Lorcan." Alara assessed the impossible situation. She knew, with a sinking certainty, that she couldn't physically make him turn away. He was her son, but he was also a powerfully built, grown man, and the dynamic between them had shifted profoundly, irrevocably. The intense, unwavering focus in his gaze told her no amount of pleading or argument would change his mind now. Her choices were stark, brutally simple. Comply or walk out of the store altogether. "Okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible, a mere breath. "Mother, you look incredible." Truly, she heard the subtle, profound shift in his voice then, from demanding intensity back to an almost boyish wonder, a breathless admiration. "Turn around for me, Mother." Alara slowly rotated in a full, deliberate circle, acutely aware of the sheer thinness of the fabric, the profound vulnerability it exposed. She wondered nervously how long they could possibly linger here without attracting unwanted, potentially disastrous attention. Lorcan, however, seemed utterly unconcerned, lost in the moment. "Lorcan, we need to be quiet. Someone might hear us. Someone might be outside." Lorcan didn't respond verbally, his eyes fixed on her. Deep down, Alara knew, with a chilling certainty, that they had been in the fitting room far too long. The risk of sudden, humiliating discovery was mounting with every passing second. She didn't want a public, humiliating encounter with store security, but Lorcan seemed utterly lost in the moment, completely oblivious to the burgeoning danger. "Everything all right in there? Need any help with the sizing?" The voice came from just outside the cubicle door. It was the young sales associate. Alara nearly jumped out of her skin, her heart hammering wildly against her ribs, a frantic drum against her chest. She swallowed hard, forcing her voice to sound relatively normal, though it trembled uncontrollably. "Yes, fine. Almost done. Be right out." This had gone too far. She couldn't possibly risk being caught, possibly even arrested, in a department store fitting room with her son. This is wrong, Lorcan. It feels amazing, don't misunderstand, but we could get into serious trouble. We have to leave. Now, Lorcan looked as though he might argue, but seeing the genuine panic and desperate determination etched on her face, he reluctantly relented, nodding curtly. She quickly pulled the door open and stepped out into the narrow corridor, Lorcan right behind her, his presence a warm, unsettling shadow. She half expected to see a stern security guard waiting, poised to intercept them, but thankfully, the corridor was empty, silent. Back in the main department, the sales associate, Cora Harper, stood behind the counter, seemingly engrossed in something on her phone again. She glanced up briefly as they approached, her expression unreadable, before returning her attention to the screen. Alara felt her racing pulse begin, slowly, to steady. She and Lorcan walked to the counter. Cora quickly pocketed her phone. A small plastic name tag pinned neatly to her blouse read Cora. She looked up at them, a small, knowing smile playing subtly on her lips, a flicker of something unsaid in her eyes. "Find everything okay? Just the one set today?" she asked, her voice even professional. Alara felt a prickle of acute unease. Was there something knowing in Cora's smile? Something hidden, an unspoken understanding behind the professional veneer? "Yes," Alara managed, striving desperately to keep her voice even, devoid of any tremor. Just this. She needed to regain her composure, to appear utterly normal. She handed over the delicate lingerie. Cora scanned the tags, folded the items neatly into a small plastic bag, completed the transaction with practiced ease, and handed Alara the receipt with another faint, almost imperceptible smile. Then, her eyes widened slightly as she looked from Alara to Lorcan and back again, a spark of recognition. "Oh my gosh," she breathed, looking directly at Lorcan now, a hint of admiration in her gaze. "She's your mom. I can totally see the resemblance, you know." Alara felt the blood drain completely from her face. The very floor seemed to tilt precariously beneath her feet. She couldn't possibly handle her secret being exposed. Not like this, not by a stranger. Cora leaned forward conspiratorially across the counter, her voice dropping to a low, intimate tone. "It's cool, honestly. I totally know what you guys are doing back there. I could hear things, you know." Alara braced herself. Certain security was about to be summoned, the final, humiliating shoe about to drop. "Don't worry," Cora said quickly, holding up a reassuring hand, a small, knowing smirk playing on her lips. "Your secret's totally safe with me." Seriously, not a single word, she whispered, her eyes twinkling. A glance at the large wall clock confirmed the mall was officially closing. The overhead lights seemed subtly dimmer, a pervasive quiet had settled, and the background music had ceased entirely. "Honestly, I think it's kind of amazing. Actually," Cora continued in a low, conspiratorial voice, leaning closer. She retrieved her phone, tapped the screen a few times, then turned it so Alara and Lorcan could both see. It displayed a web page, some kind of online forum or community Alara had never encountered before, filled with similar narratives. "Been fantasizing about something like this since I was a freshman in college. No joke. You're seriously lucky, both of you." Alara was utterly speechless, unable to form a coherent response. Thank you for your discretion," was all she could manage to stammer out, her voice a strained whisper. She turned quickly to leave, Lorcan falling in a step seamlessly beside her. "Hey," Cora called softly after them, her voice barely audible in the quiet store. "If you ever, want to come back and try stuff on again, don't be shy, all right? I work Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday nights. It gets really dead back here right before close. Good time to visit. I could, keep an eye out for you." "Thanks," Alara mumbled, not looking back, her face burning. "Maybe. We'll see." Lorcan should be dating someone like Cora, Alara thought fleetingly, a desperate, fleeting hope. But no, that simply wouldn't happen. Cora wasn't Lorcan's type at all. For better or worse, Alara knew exactly who Lorcan's type was now. It was her. They hurried through the nearly empty store, the silence amplifying their footsteps. "Grandview Galleria is now closed. Please proceed to the nearest marked exit," a disembodied voice announced over the cavernous PA system, echoing eerily. They found the exit leading directly back to the parking garage and took the elevator up to the top level. Neither spoke a single word. When the elevator doors slid open, the thick, hot night air slapped them in the face with a suffocating embrace. They stepped out onto the rooftop. The sky was completely black now, a vast, starless expanse, but the city below glittered, a vast, intricate grid of shimmering lights. High-mast lamps cast pools of stark, chalky light across the asphalt, though thankfully, the one nearest Alara's car remained dark, its bulb clearly burnt out, leaving her sleek sedan partially shrouded in deep shadow. Alara noted with a jolt that her car was the only one left on the entire level. Everyone else had departed into the night. Ordinarily, walking to her car alone in this isolated, dimly lit spot would have made her profoundly nervous, but with her tall, strong son beside her, she felt strangely, unsettlingly secure. He might be her son, but he moved with the confident, imposing presence of a man. They reached the car, and Alara unlocked the doors with a soft click of her key fob. As she reached for the driver's side door handle, she realized Lorcan hadn't moved around to the passenger side. He stood directly beside her, his expression intense, unyielding in the gloom. "Father's home," she said preemptively, her voice hushed, strained. "And he actually wasn't drinking when I left. We can't risk it with him there. He'd know Lorcan. So, what exactly are we supposed to do?" Lorcan asked, his voice low and gravelly, a rough whisper in the hot night air. "Rent a motel room," he suggested, then immediately shook his head, dismissing the idea. "No," he decided, his gaze unwavering from hers. "Right here, Lorcan, stop it. We're still in public. Even up here, someone could come. Security could patrol. No, it's fine, he insisted, his hand resting lightly, possessively on her arm, his touch a burning brand. Look around. The whole level's completely empty. That light's out. It's dark right here. Nobody is going to see us, Mother. Just then, Illyra's eyes caught a faint movement far below, near the mall exit on the ground level. A lone figure, carrying a solitary shopping bag, was walking deliberately across the vast, dark, empty lower parking lot. It appeared to be a man. He was perhaps 150 yards away, heading towards a car parked a significant distance from any others. His path would bring him closer, maybe within 100 yards, but still quite far off in the darkness. He seemed singularly focused on reaching his vehicle, and Illyra was initially certain he hadn't noticed them high above. Lorcan either didn't see the man or simply didn't care, his attention solely on her. With a jolt of alarm, Illyra saw the distant figure reach his car, stop beside it, directly under one of the functioning, harsh lamps, making his silhouette clearer in the artificial light. He paused, looked around briefly, and then he looked up, directly towards them, his gaze seemingly fixed. There was no mistaking it now. He had seen them. Lorcan, Illyra gasped, her voice tight with rising panic, barely a whisper of sound. There's a man down there. He's looking right at us, I swear. Is he security? Lorcan asked, his tone remaining unervingly calm, utterly unconcerned. No, I don't think so, she breathed, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Looks like just another shopper. Go in his car, I think. Okay, Lorcan said dismissively, a slight huff of air. He's not going to do anything, Mother. It was dark outside the car and darker still inside, but Illyra instinctively tried to shrink down further in the seat, to become invisible. She didn't want to be seen, not like this, not for reasons that defied all logic yet felt overwhelmingly, terrifyingly real. She knew, with a sinking, unavoidable certainty, that she was going to do as Lorcan wished. The odds of being recognized by this distant, anonymous stranger were infinitesimally minuscule. Yet the risk, however small, sent a thrilling jolt of fear and illicit excitement surging through her veins. You're going back to university very soon, she murmured a last, feeble, almost desperate protest, her voice thin. It's not healthy for you to be so utterly focused on your mother, Lorcan. Mother, let me handle my own health, Lorcan replied softly, his hand finding hers in the comforting, illicit darkness, his fingers intertwining with hers. I'm far more worried about you. You know Father doesn't make you happy anymore. And I don't see you ever actually leaving him, do you? He was right, devastatingly so. Illyra had contemplated divorce countless times, dreamed of escape, envisioned a life free from the suffocating malaise of her marriage. But something always held her back, an invisible, insurmountable barrier. She wasn't sure if it was financial dependence, a debilitating fear of profound loneliness, a pervasive concern for outward appearances, or simply the immense weight of the vows she'd made years ago in a sunlit church, envisioning a future so starkly different from the desolate reality she now inhabited. Despite Ronan's profound neglect and chilling indifference, the final, decisive step of truly leaving him felt insurmountable, utterly beyond her reach. The city lights blurred into shimmering streaks as Lorcan finally pulled out of the parking garage and drove them towards home. Illyra stared blankly out the window, lost in a maelstrom of conflicting, potent emotions, corrosive guilt, desperate desire, paralyzing fear, and a bewildering, profound sense of inevitable surrender.